What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the ban list discussion series. This is going to be episode 10, and then we have one or two more episodes left, sort of wrapping up the rest of the list and responding to feedback. So today we're going to take a look at the traps, do the rest of the actual Forbidden Limited list section. I'm joined by Ryan. You can find a link to his YouTube channel in the description below, and definitely show him some love, give him a follow, or subscribe, or whatever platform we're on right now. And if you haven't seen the previous episodes yet, where we've gone through the rest of the ban list, the link will be in the description below, but this should also be part of a playlist, so you can find it in a bunch of different ways. This should be a relatively quick one, at least theoretically speaking, as we go through traps. There's only 9 total options on here. I'm going to go ahead and give Ryan the ball to start this off as we look at last turn. Where do you stand on this?
You know, for pretty much the same reason that Victory Dragon is banned, it's just a sort of procedural nightmare for tournaments. Any cards that can force draws are procedural nightmares for tournaments, and they usually get rid of them. That's about it. There's nothing... I mean, it's just read the card, it's ridiculous, but it can force draws. That's
Fair enough. I think for people that, just because when I was actually posting some of the other videos on Reddit and stuff, and people were talking about it, people didn't seem to understand what makes it so, easy to do. I mean, realistically, you have cards like Wall of Revealing Light that was, limited forever ago because it basically would just pay the life points and then activate this. But when you summon something out like Jowgen the Spiritualist, or you have that out, and then basically you tell your opponent they can't special summon, you pretty much win the game regardless, and it creates, like you said, a ruling nightmare, but also it's just kind of a cheese win. Like, it's not a win condition card that gives you any kind of effort, like Venom and Aga or something like that, where you actually have to do something. This is pretty straightforward and effortless to pull off, and you can just kind of cheese a win, and I think it takes some of the elements of fun out of it. So yeah, I'm out on this as well. Obviously, it's banned for numerous reasons, but I don't think this is a card that we'll ever see come back. Go ahead.
Yeah, this card just will never come back.
Yeah, it doesn't... There's no argument you can make for it. It's not like it adds any kind of healthy interaction. This isn't anything that rewards your effort. It's basically like, set something that makes you pay life points, and then just put a monster out and basically win the game. And that's not fun. That's not... we talked about Change of Heart and stuff like that in the last video about how those cards are broken, but they can add an element of fun to the game. This isn't going to do that. Like, you're not going to be like, oh boy, getting last turn was great. So yeah, no, I'm also with you on this. Next up, we've got Return from the Different Dimension. Now, this card was banned ultimately in 2016, for Dragon Rulers. It had just become way too strong. It was at 3 for a while and didn't see play for the longest time. And then once decks like Dragon Rulers came around, and certain Xyz decks in general, it just became so much more easy to use this card and to just fill your board with 5 monsters and then just go off. Alternatively, it also made it so that, certain restrictions, quote-unquote, like banishing stuff that's supposed to make it less accessible, actually turned into a plus. So for so many reasons, this basically functions like a soul charge. And honestly, in Dragon Ruler specifically, which is what got this ban, that quote-unquote punishment part of the effect where during the end phase all the monsters are banished, if you did have any left, it's just going to trigger their search effects anyway. So this was just all around way too powerful. So as much as I remember the times when it was kind of bad and think it may be a little slow as a trap, I just think it does too much to ever see the light of day again.
Especially because it's a card that just gets better the longer the game goes on, because they keep making decks that are good by either banishing stuff for cost or function off being banished, like Thunder Dragons and Orcus and stuff like that. So, yeah, imagine activating this on Thunder Dragon and summoning 4 monsters who all get their effect after they get banished at the end of the turn. This card is just ridiculously powerful.
That is right. Thunder Dragons do trigger off banishing or hitting the graveyard, and that is... I never even considered that. I'm just thinking Xyz spam or Link spam or something, but no, that is... Yeah, no. Definitely a no on this, then. That gave me an extra sense of I mean, this is one of those cards kind of like Dimension Fusion, but obviously Dimension Fusion is better because A, it's a normal spell, B, it's just pay 2,000 life points, and C, it doesn't destroy those monsters or anything, but this has other uses that it may combo with a bit better, and I don't think we're going to see this move, nor would I argue for it. Alright, we've got Self-Destruct button. This is one I don't want to spend much time on, realistically speaking, so I'll just briefly say Obviously, any card that like forces a draw, like you said, is not only a rulings nightmare, but just like typically, I don't know, if you're playing any kind of competitive thing, whether it's video games or, you know, card games or what have you, you want to win. And this just makes it so you're not, I mean, it's just forcing a draw, and then you're basically, like, stalling into your second game and winning by burn damage or something. That's not, like, a win that feels rewarding. It's not an indication that you're a good player. It's just, you know how to do cheesy, stupid shit. And I don't really see the logic behind this card ever really being printed, nor do I know anyone that would be like, yeah, I miss being able to play this, unless you're just, like, super into the whole trolley element of things.
Just falls in line with what we said about FDK cards. Like, they just can't come back because of what they do to the game as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. There's just no health for it. There's just no, this doesn't, like, it doesn't encourage strong deck building, it doesn't encourage strategic play, it doesn't do any of that. It's just like, okay, let's force a draw and then play Chain Burn or something, and that's just stupid. Like, at that point, you might as well just, I don't know, just do something else where you're going to be a little bit more challenged. Okay, so yeah, we're in agreement. This is staying where it is. Next one, Sixth Sense. This card is, and I know we've talked about this before, this card is absolutely nuts for so many reasons, but we actually did have it legally in the TCG. When it came out in Legendary Collection Joey's World back in 2013, it was legal for a format. It was emergency limited when it came out, so it was never playable at more than one, but it was played in Dragon Rulers and other decks at the time. It's not hard to understand why it's as good as it is just by looking at it, but you can manipulate those numbers so that, you know, you can either guarantee a really good mill and increase your chances of a potential draw, or just kind of play around with it. But there are no drawbacks for this card, realistically. You're either getting to mill or you're plussing a ton, and either one, in the majority of decks, is going to be something that's super beneficial.
Yeah, this is a prime example of a read it card. Like, you just look at it and you understand why this card is banned.
Yeah, somebody told me the other day that it seems like it's too slow and that it wouldn't be good anymore, or wouldn't be used much anymore. I do kind of find that hard to believe. I think that for the most part, this card would probably be played in almost every deck, simply because, I mean, if it's a deck that plays any hand traps at all, you know, the ability to possibly draw into those during your opponent's turn to get the free pluses. I struggle to think of an example of a deck that just wouldn't have some benefit from playing this card, even if you did end up losing on the roll for the draw and having to mill. So, we saw it at one. It was legal. It was broken. I don't think this is one that will ever come back, and it's just too good. There's no real drawbacks to it. So, we'll leave it where it is. Okay, this may be the first one that we have at least a little bit of thoughts on here. A Time Seal. Skip the draw phase of your opponent's next turn. This card has been banned for quite a while. Actually hasn't been printed in 17 years. I think this card could come to one very easily. I know privately we've discussed this, sort of like anything other than one is really problematic because of things like Trap Trick existing and the increased consistency of being able to see this. But I would argue that for the most part, one Time Seal, in the majority of decks, if you draw a Time Seal, you're going to want that card to be something else. Like, almost any of the times that you're drawing that, you're going to be like, wow, if this was one of my search cards or one of my draw cards or another combo piece, I'd be so much better off. It just doesn't do that much for you as a one-of in terms of really giving you any kind of significant advantage. And, like, yes, you can get a scenario where your opponent doesn't have a lot of cards in hand, or you lock them down and you block their draw. But, like, in that situation, if you have a board of, like, 5 negates and you're blocking their draw, they're probably not in a position where they were going to win anyway. It's not like the Time Seal is going to be the make or break. You're pretty much, you know, they don't have any answers to any of your plays. You're allowed to play uninterrupted. It's just putting icing on the cake. So I think the only decks that would really utilize this are, like, your Altergeist or Trap Trick or something that, like, you know, utilizes normal traps and plays a slow grind game and can really pick away at you. But I don't see this card problematic at one.
Card could be at one, and it wouldn't really be that big of an issue. It's super simple. If you can't get to it quickly with something like Trap Trick or by having multiples of it, it's not nearly as impactful of a card. And while I don't entirely agree with your sentiment that it's icing on the cake for decks like that, there are only specific decks that would play it. So I think it's fine at one.
Okay, yeah, ultimately what I meant by that more so was that, like, Time Seal at 1 is not going to be the make or break card for a deck that it's not like playing Time Seal is going to suddenly make a deck strategy unbeatable, or suddenly make the difference in a deck that wasn't able to perform before, but suddenly can perform at a high level because Time Seal's in the deck.
Yeah.
I just don't think it makes that much of a difference. Obviously, the more copies of this card there are legal, the more problematic it becomes, especially because of consistency. But I think at 1, it would be fine. I don't know if we'll ever see it, but I'd be interested to see what type of impact that it made. And realistically, I argued for Yada, so I have to argue for this, I think. I feel like it's just kind of one and the same. If, we're going to experiment with whether or not recreating the ability to skip a phase is still incredibly problematic, this is, the ideal card to try that with. So, yeah, we say 1 is possible. Okay, Trap Dust Shoot. This is one that has been around for a while. This was only banned back in, 2015, I think, so it did live a long shelf life at 1. It's a really, really powerful card, particularly if you open it. It was really good back with Mind Crush because you could play this, get something out of the hand, and then Mind Crush to hit something else. That was basically a staple combo in a lot of decks back when this card was super prevalent, and even before it was super prevalent. Usually, if you were playing Dust Shoot, you played Mind Crush with it. The knowledge that it gives you, and the fact that if you just open this and set it, you can resolve it on the opponent before they even get a chance to do anything about it, it can immediately put you in such a more advanced position before the opponent even has a chance to react or respond. And unfortunately, though I do remember this card fondly and definitely had a ton of fun playing with it back when it was legal, I just think it's way too powerful, and if anything, even better now, because you look at the hand, you pick a hand trap in the hand that might disrupt you, and you get rid of it, and then you look at the rest of the hand, and you're like, okay, yeah, I can play around all of this. I know there's an Abiru, so I'm not going to summon an X amount of times, or I know there's an Ash, so I'm not going to search. It gives you a lot of control and ability for very minimal cost and activation requirements.
Yeah, especially because this card can't be hand trapped. I don't think there's a single hand trap in the game that can stop this card from resolving. Except for Red Reboot, I guess, but that's banned, or that's at
Limited,
1 currently,
yeah.
so it's not used in anything anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you knowledge, and it shuffles the card into the deck as opposed to discarding it, which is infinitely better. So there's just a lot of reasons this card should never come back.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, as much as, like I said, it was definitely a fun thing back in the day, games were different. Games were slower. There weren't a lot of hand traps. You could, in some scenarios, play through a Dust Shoot, but even back in the day, it was still crippling. You could still get hit with this, and they could hit your combo piece out of your hand, or hit whatever your play starter is, and know what you have left, and you're screwed. And this is, before we even had these incredible, well, not completely before combo decks. Obviously, things like Wind Up and Infernity and whatnot did exist while this card was legal, but I'm just speaking from a more general perspective. If it was as good as it was back then, and nothing has happened to make it worse, I feel like it would just be even stronger now.
Especially since every deck now tries to play off pretty much one card. And
yeah,
they play so many hand traps, there's a solid chance that only 2 or 3 cards in their hand are really playable.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can hit the relevant one, then they're sitting there with an Ash, a Droll Lockbird, or whatever the hell playing, and then 2 cards they can try to play with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not good. Or
and
sorry, 3 cards.
Hand traps become a lot less powerful when you know that they're all there, and you can be a lot more selective about what resources you're using, and either bait your opponent and force them to use it, or resolve the effects you want to resolve. And just the knowledge of knowing which hand traps are there makes them even, a little bit more fragile. So I think all of those factors mean Dust Shoot's going to have to stay where it is. Sorry to anyone that was in disagreement on that. Okay, we got 3 left. Ultimate Offering. This card back in the day went through lots of phases. It was quite literally useless for a long time, back, for a while. And then Gadgets came out, and it was really solid in Gadgets because you could play it and you could get extra searches and stuff. But even then, prior to XC's existing, this wasn't that great either in Gadgets because, yeah, you could summon a bunch of Gadgets out and play stuff like Forbidden Lance and, 1-for-1 traps at the time like D-Prison and stuff, and just basically have that advantage and force the opponent to have to, overcome it, but it wasn't really until YuGiOh with YuGiOh X and some of the other XCs that came out that this card really took off for decks like Gadgets and showed what type of just completely destructive power a card like this would have when there's Links and Xyz and Synchros, and it's not just normal summoning and running into a Mirror Force, Like, way back when, this card went through periods of, like, seeing some meta representation, but it wasn't amazing or anything until it was abusable. And now we have so many cards that trigger off of normal summons and trigger off of having extra stuff on the field and Links and can refresh your hand, and it's just this card would need a hard once per turn, I think, in order to be able to move off the list, and at that point I think it would be mostly useless, so it's hard to say whether or not it would be anything we'll ever see again in the game.
Yeah, this one is just really easily never coming off the list without Narada. For every reason that you said, it's just, it allows dumb things to happen. And it can be used on your opponent's turn to stop you from losing. Like, anytime you would take more than 500 life points, and you can summon something that reduces that to something less than what you normally would have taken, it's just stalling the game even further. Potentially getting hard once per turn effects on your opponent's turn during their battle phase. There's a bunch of different things that make this card, like, dumb. I would never want to see this card off the list.
Yeah, I'm with you. One of my favorite combos back in the day with Gadgets was with Utopia Ray, where you could manually get your life points down to under 1,000 just by spamming and resolving those effects, and then you could swing for 4k damage right there by just summoning 2 Gadgets and making a Utopia. And there were a lot of cheesy combos like that you could do. But I think of cards like Shockmaster and things of that nature that are just inherently broken as is, and how easy this card allows those decks to bring that out. I mean, think about Gadgets not only having red, yellow, and green at this point, but they also have gold and silver, and Tin Goldfish, it feels like that's a deck that could be primed to abuse this and just go off if it resolved, and I don't see that being good. So, Ultimate Offering, they did try to make a new card. I forget exactly what it's called. It came out in one of the more recent sets, and it's like a once per turn, you pay 1,000, and then you can tribute summon one level 5 or higher monster during your main phase or opponent's battle phase, but it's like a hard once per turn, I think it is. So it's definitely a much more watered down version. Okay, we got 2 left. Royal Oppression. This is one that I've had a lot of interesting discussions about over the years. This card got banned right around the time I actually started playing, quote-unquote competitively. On the surface, a lot of people will look at this and say that it's not too broken because... Not a lot of people, but some people might. This is one of the arguments I've seen in favor of its return, that either player can pay the 800 to negate or to block the effects. But I would argue that this is going to function in a way that you're going to basically make all the plays you need to make and then activate this. And once it's activated, if your opponent isn't playing spell or trap removal, there's no way for this to get off the board. So it's not going to necessarily negatively impact you if you've already made your Borreload Savage Dragon and Crystal Wing and everything else that you're going to negate with, and then flip this on the opponent who, facing that big board, is already going to be struggling to maintain life points and is not really going to have a lot of opportunities to use this against you.
In the current landscape of this game, Royal Oppression has absolutely no downsides, because most decks can make some sort of functional board off of only one card. And then they could have like a hand trap and then a Royal Oppression, and you're just sitting there like, and it's almost impossible for you to get over a monster that has like 1,800 attack points and no effect because of this card. Just because you can stop your opponent from special summoning doesn't really matter, because they can stop you from ever getting to the point where that's relevant for you.
Agreed.
So, and this card, it has no drawbacks. It has a cost of 800 life points, which is nothing.
You're right.
That's it. It contrasts with the next card on the list in the sense that this card has absolutely no drawbacks, whereas that other card does. So,
yeah,
that's about it.
I think this is basically an even more powerful version of the last card we're going to get to in a moment. Again, it has no real drawback there. And alternatively, the other card, which Vanity's Emptiness, which we're going to get to in a second, just stops special summoning. This negates the summon or effects that special summon a monster and destroy them. So it does give you even more ability to chain it more effectively, negate stuff, pop stuff, and ultimately, like I said, the biggest problem from it comes not that both players can use it, but that you can use it after, and you can protect it, and the opponent's going to be too far gone to be able to come back, especially if you get to it first before they get a chance to set up. So that's a no from me on Royal Oppression. And the last card for the ban list section of traps is Vanity's Emptiness. I would argue that this card should come back to 1. I know that may be a bit of a controversial opinion, and I'm going to let you sort of give your reasoning on it as well, but I'll say briefly that I definitely love this card. I think it's extremely powerful, but I also think it has a self-balancing factor with the fact that, you know, if any card is sent from the deck or field to the grave, to your grave, sorry, it is destroyed. So even if your opponent is not playing Spell and Trap Destruction in their main board, there are ways to out this by, you know, crashing into a monster, destroying something. And I know that's not always going to be super feasible, but it does have that self-balancing factor. It also has the fact that if your opponent does out one of your monsters or one of your other spells and traps, this then gets popped as well. So you could find yourself, you know, at a minus. I definitely think it would be a card that, if it did come back, we would need to see something like Red Reboot and other, you know, similar cards of that nature come back with it or move back with it, because there does need to be a way to make sure that, like, you have a reasonable chance of countering it. But I'd really like to see this card back at 1. I definitely miss being able to play it, and I think it doesn't require a lot of skill. It does sort of require, you know, when do you activate the Vanity's Emptiness? What's the timing? You know, is your opponent going to chain 2 your Vanities and resolve a special summon before this resolves? I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, similar to Max C, where it's just kind of like thought that has to be there. And I think that for the most part, floodgates that are not, like, inherently oppressive, no pun intended, like Royal Oppression, realistically should all be at 1, and both players should have equal access to them. So I am in favor of Vanities coming to 1, at least as an experiment. I do think it's a card that has that built-in drawback that allows you some alternative ways to get it off the field, and I think it does require some skill to use effectively, even if there will be times that it's kind of easy to steal a game with this.
The fact that it goes away is really important whenever another card leaves your field or goes from your deck to the grave, because there's just a lot of ways to sort of get rid of this card. We exist in a format where Lightning Storm is a mandatory 3 of in the sideboard. We live in a format where Nibiru is not a horrible card, and sometimes if you have a Vanities, maybe you got Nibiru'd before Vanities came out, or, you know, before Vanities flipped on your first turn, and now you're stuck with, like, a token that maybe is easy to remove. If you had all links, that token is, like, the easiest thing to kill on the planet. There's a lot more ways to get around this card than there are something like Royal Oppression. And I want the game to be slower, and I think this is a good card to do that with.
Yeah, I agree. And I know it's not going to be the most popular opinion. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to say that this should probably not come back. And certainly there is some merit to that argument, where I think the people that argue for Max C have a lot less merit, because I think the majority of people that are against Max C are primarily combo deck players, where I get that Vanities definitely has had its moments of being extremely abusable. And I would never, ever argue for this to come to 3, because at that point it just becomes extremely, extremely oppressive and way too powerful, because you have a really
wicked expensive too.
Well, that too, yeah. I mean, this
so
is
expensive.
$100 common that you know was one of
Yeah.
the first cards that was ever $100, and even the secret rare now is $25-$26, and it's not even legal. So think about the prices that would happen. I would think we would need like an OTS reprint or something of this if it were to come back. But
yeah, when this card was legal at 1 and the secret came out, the secret was still like $80
mm-hmm.
for like a
Understandably,
long time.
being one of the nicest looking secret rares in the game, in my opinion. I think just real quick side note topic, I think a lot of the foil patterns on Yu-Gi-Oh cards in the past like 10 to 12 years have decreased in quality tremendously. I think just the cheaper methods that they use and the different type of foil patterning that they apply makes the cards look nowhere near as good as they do in like other countries. But I think Legendary Collection 5Ds did a really nice job with their foiling, and Vanity's Emptiness and some of those other cards definitely definitely have a great aesthetic to them. So another reason I would like to play this, I'd like to be able to actually have access to that secret rare and utilize it a bit more. But yeah, so I'd be okay with 1 on this, seeing where it goes, and who knows, we could be wrong. It could be too powerful, at which point they would reban it. So it's just one of those things I think would be good to see. All right, and that's going to wrap up this video. Thank you guys for watching and tuning in. So just to give you a timeline of the rest of the series at this point, we're going to have 2 more videos. We've got the full limited, semi-limited list, which is just like 1 card. I think it's like malicious. We're going to do that all in 1 video, maybe 2, depending on how long it comes out. And then after that, what we'll do is once all the videos have been posted, about midway through June, probably like the 15th, because I definitely would like to finish all of this before the actual July ban list gets announced, so that we can maybe come back and look at that later. Is we're going to do like a feedback. So anyone that leaves comments, whether on Reddit, YouTube, other places that's been shared, we're going to react to some of that feedback in the video, discuss it, and sort of wrap up the series as a whole. So if you want to be included in that final video and have your feedback shown, we'll plug your YouTube channel or whatever. If you have someone you want to plug to, just include that in the comment and we'll give you a bit of a shout out there. Then definitely let us know and leave some feedback so that we can have a chance to discuss it. That being said, that's going to do it for this video. We'll see you guys next time. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and definitely please check out Ryan's channel as well and show him some love. We'll see you guys in the next video.